What if everything you know about the world is wrong? Not slightly wrong, completely wrong. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that every map you've ever seen, every classroom globe, every image of Earth from space was hiding something. Something so strange that most people would refuse to believe it. For centuries, humanity has been told that Earth is a giant sphere floating through space, a planet orbiting the sun, a tiny blue dot in an endless universe. But according to one of the most controversial theories ever created, Earth isn't a globe at all. It's a vast plain, a world surrounded by an enormous wall of ice, a wall we know as Antarctica. And beyond that wall, according to the theory, lies something humanity was never supposed to see. At first, this sounds ridiculous, and maybe it is, but the deeper you go into the mystery, the stranger it becomes. Because the real flat Earth theory was never just about the shape of the planet. The real mystery was always about what might exist beyond the edge. For thousands of years, ancient cultures spoke of lands beyond the known world. Forgotten kingdoms, endless oceans, territories hidden behind walls of ice. Most historians dismiss these stories as myths, legends invented by sailors and explorers. But what if they weren't myths? What if they were memories? Imagine for a moment that Antarctica is not a continent. Imagine it as a barrier, a gigantic frozen ring surrounding everything we know. Mountains of ice stretching for thousands of miles, preventing anyone from reaching whatever lies beyond. Now ask yourself something. If there is truly nothing beyond Antarctica, why does the mystery never die? Why do people keep asking the same question generation after generation? What is beyond the ice? According to one version of the theory, a secret expedition once attempted to find out. The team traveled farther than any explorer before them. They crossed endless frozen landscapes, past towering walls of ice, and eventually reached something impossible: another ocean, beyond Antarctica. An ocean that shouldn't exist. An ocean that wasn't on any map. But that was only the beginning, because after weeks of travel, they saw land. A massive continent hidden beyond the ice, larger than entire countries, untouched, unknown, completely absent from human history. The explorers expected to find wilderness. Instead, they found ruins, giant structures stretching across the horizon, cities larger than anything ever built by humanity. Empty streets, silent towers, ancient machines frozen in time. It looked as though an entire civilization had vanished overnight. But the strangest discovery was waiting inside one of the structures. Deep beneath the ruins, they found a chamber. At its center stood a map unlike anything ever seen before. The explorers expected to see Earth. Instead, they saw hundreds of worlds, giant circular regions connected together like rings, one beyond another, endless, stretching farther than the eye could follow. And there, among countless circles, was our world. Not at the center, not special, just one region among thousands. Then they noticed something even more disturbing. Each world had a number, not a name, a number, as if they were experiments, test sites, controlled environments, and Earth was one of them. Suddenly the theory changed. This was no longer about flat Earth. This was about containment. The explorers continued searching the ruins, hoping to find answers. Instead, they found a final room, a room that should not have existed. A room containing records describing every world shown on the map. Population data, environmental data, behavioral data, as though someone had been observing them for centuries. Then one explorer found a file marked with a familiar number, Earth's number. His hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a single page, and on that page were only 3 lines. Containment successful. Observation complete. Memory reset scheduled. The room fell silent. Nobody understood what it meant, until they noticed the date. It wasn't from the past. It wasn't from hundreds of years ago. It was today's date. According to the document, the reset was supposed to happen now, right now, at this exact moment. Then the lights inside the chamber suddenly shut off, one by one. Darkness consumed the room. The explorers tried to escape, but their radios stopped working, their equipment failed, and the last transmission they ever sent contained only one sentence. A sentence that would become one of the most chilling messages ever recorded. We were never meant to leave. The signal ended, The expedition was never heard from again. And maybe that's where the story should end. But there's one final detail, the most terrifying detail of all. According to the theory, Earth is not being hidden from us. We are being hidden from something outside the walls, something beyond the ice, something watching, waiting, and if the walls ever fall, whatever is out there will finally know where we are. And maybe that's why nobody is allowed to see beyond the edge. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing you're the last person alive on Earth. No cars, no voices, no messages, no people. Just silence. And for Daniel Carter, that silence lasted exactly 3 days. Because on the 4th day, his phone rang. At first, Daniel thought it was a dream. He had gone to sleep like any other night. But when he woke up, something felt wrong. There was no sound outside his apartment. No traffic, no neighbors arguing, not even birds. The city was silent. Completely silent. Daniel walked to the window. Thousands of cars sat motionless in the streets. Traffic lights still changed colors, but nobody was there. No drivers, no pedestrians, nothing. Confused, Daniel rushed downstairs. He searched the entire building. Every apartment, every room, empty. He ran into the streets, screaming for help. No answer. He drove through the city for hours. Restaurants, hospitals, police stations, airports. Everything was abandoned. Not a single person remained, and nobody knew why. At first, Daniel believed everyone had been evacuated. Maybe a chemical leak, maybe war, maybe something the government wasn't telling people. But after days of searching, he discovered something terrifying. Animals were still alive. Electricity still worked. The internet still functioned. But every human being on Earth had vanished. Except him. Weeks passed. Daniel tried contacting anyone. He broadcast messages on radios, uploaded videos, sent emails, nothing. No replies, no signs of life. Eventually, loneliness became unbearable. He stopped shaving, stopped eating regularly, stopped caring. He spent most nights staring at old family photos, wondering why he had survived, and everyone else hadn't. Months later, Daniel accepted the truth. He was alone, the last person on Earth. Until one night, everything changed. At exactly 2:13 a.m., his phone started ringing. Daniel froze. His heart nearly stopped. The screen showed, unknown number. For several seconds, he couldn't move. It had been almost a whole year without hearing another human voice. His hands shook as he answered. Hello? Silence. Then, breathing. Someone was breathing on the other end. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. Please, please say something. And finally, a voice answered. Hello? It was a woman. Daniel nearly collapsed. Oh my God, you're alive. The woman sounded just as terrified. Who are you? My name is Daniel. I'm Emily. For the first time in a year, Daniel wasn't alone. They talked for hours. Emily explained that she had experienced the exact same thing. She had woken up one morning and found everyone gone. Just like him. For 11 months, she had believed she was the last person alive. Until now. The two spoke every day, sometimes for 12 hours straight. They shared memories, favorite movies, childhood stories, anything to escape the endless loneliness. Eventually, Daniel asked the question he'd been waiting to ask. Where are you? Emily hesitated. Then she answered, Chicago. Daniel smiled. I'll come find you. But Emily immediately said no. No, don't. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? There was silence. Then Emily whispered, because I'm already there. Daniel laughed nervously. What? I'm in Chicago too. His smile disappeared. What part of Chicago? Emily gave him the address. Daniel's blood ran cold. It was the same address, the exact same apartment building. No, that's impossible. Daniel rushed outside. His breathing became heavy. He looked up at the building across the street. Every window was dark. Everything looked normal. Emily, where are you? I'm standing by my window. Daniel stared at his own window. Empty. No one. I don't see you. Emily sounded frightened. Neither do I. Both of them described what they saw. Everything matched. The same streets, the same cars, the same buildings. But neither could see the other. Over the following weeks, they performed experiments. They left notes. moved objects, used flashlights. Nothing worked. It was as if they occupied two identical worlds, separated by something invisible. Months later, Daniel made a discovery. Inside an abandoned university laboratory, he found a damaged computer still running. On its screen was a message, not from scientists, not from the government, but from someone named Emily Harper. Daniel's heart stopped. The message had been recorded years earlier. It read, "If anyone finds this, my name is Emily. I think I understand what's happening. We're not alone. There are many of us, each one living in a different version of Earth, each believing they're the last person alive. And somehow, we're able to hear each other, but we can never meet, because we're not in the same world." Daniel slowly picked up his phone, his hands trembling. Emily. But there was no answer. The call had ended, and this time her number no longer existed. For the next 10 years, Daniel never received another call. Until one rainy night, at exactly 2:13 a.m., his phone rang again. Unknown number. Daniel answered immediately, and through the static, he heard a frightened voice, a voice he had never heard before, a voice desperately asking, "Hello? Is anybody still alive?" And somewhere, in another version of Earth, someone else realized they were not alone. Have you ever remembered something so clearly? A logo, a movie quote, a famous event, something you've known your entire life. And then one day, you discover that it never happened, not according to history, not according to the internet, not according to anyone else. At first, you assume you're mistaken, but then you find thousands, sometimes millions, of people who remember the exact same thing. How can so many people share the same false memory? This is the mystery known as the Mandela effect. The story begins with a strange phenomenon. Many people around the world believed that Nelson Mandela died in prison during the 1980s. Some even claimed they remembered seeing news reports and watching his funeral on television. There was only one problem. It never happened. Nelson Mandela was released from prison. He later became president of South Africa, and he died decades later. So why did so many people remember a completely different version of history? At first, psychologists offered a simple explanation. Human memory is not a perfect recording. Every time we remember something, our brain reconstructs it. Small details can change. Memories can blend together. And sometimes, large groups of people can make the same mistake. It sounds reasonable, but for many people, the explanation doesn't feel complete. Because the Mandela effect isn't just one memory, it's hundreds of them. Imagine waking up tomorrow morning. Everything appears normal. Your house, your family, your phone, your daily routine. Nothing seems different. But then you notice something strange. A movie line you've heard 100 times is suddenly different. A famous logo doesn't look the way you remember it. A historical fact you've known your entire life has somehow changed. Everyone around you insists that it has always been that way. Always. No exceptions. No evidence of the version you remember. Nothing. Eventually, a disturbing theory begins to form in your mind. What if your memory isn't wrong? What if reality changed? According to one popular theory, the Mandela effect may be connected to alternate timelines. The idea suggests that countless versions of reality could exist simultaneously, each one slightly different from the others. In one reality, a historical event happens one way. In another, it happens differently. Most of the time, these realities remain separate. But what if somehow they occasionally overlap? What if people sometimes retain memories from a different version of reality? Memories that no longer belong in this world. Imagine two nearly identical universes. In one universe, an event happens one way. In the other, it happens differently. Now imagine those universes somehow merging together. Most people adapt without noticing. But a few people remember fragments of the old reality. Tiny pieces of a world that no longer exists. To everyone else, those memories seem impossible. But to them, those memories feel completely real. Because they are. At least from their perspective. Of course, there is no scientific evidence proving that alternate timelines are responsible for the Mandela effect. Most researchers still believe it can be explained by the way human memory works. and perhaps they're right. But even today, millions of people continue to experience memories that don't match reality. Memories they would swear are true. Memories they cannot explain. And that leads to one final question. If thousands of people remember the same thing, and reality says it never happened, who is wrong? The people or reality itself? Because if alternate timelines truly exist, then maybe some of your memories aren't mistakes. Maybe they're echoes. Fragments of another world, a different history, a different timeline, a different reality, one that you somehow remember, even though it no longer exists. And if that's true, then the most terrifying possibility is not that your memory is failing, it's that reality has changed, and you're one of the few people who noticed. There are thousands of islands scattered across the oceans of our planet. Some are famous, some are unexplored, and some, according to a handful of classified reports and the stories of a few terrified survivors, should not exist at all. Because somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, there is an island where time itself doesn't behave normally. An island where people leave, only to discover that the world they return to is no longer the world they left behind. And if those stories are true, then somewhere out there, people may still be trapped. Not in space, not underground, but in time. The story began in 1997. A small research vessel named Aurora was traveling through a remote section of the Pacific Ocean. The crew consisted of 6 experienced researchers and a captain who had spent most of his life at sea. Everything was normal until their navigation systems started malfunctioning. At first, they assumed it was a technical problem, but within minutes, every instrument on board stopped working. GPS, radio, compass, everything. And then, they saw it. An island. None of the crew had ever seen it before, and according to their maps, it wasn't supposed to be there. Curious and with no way to communicate with the outside world, they decided to anchor nearby and investigate. At first glance, the place seemed completely normal. White sand, dense trees, fresh water. No signs of human life. No buildings, no animals, no birds, nothing. It was silent. Unnaturally silent. But after spending a few hours exploring, strange things began happening. Their watches stopped. Digital cameras froze. Batteries drained within seconds. And every time they tried to record the island, the footage became distorted, as if something didn't want to be captured. That night, something even stranger happened. The stars above them looked wrong. Constellations appeared slightly out of place. The moon seemed brighter. And according to the crew's records, the sun rose almost 30 minutes earlier than it should have. But they ignored the signs. They decided to stay one more day, then another, and another. Eventually, after what they believed was only 2 weeks, their equipment suddenly started working again. Relieved, they returned to civilization. But when they reached the nearest port, nobody recognized their ship. Nobody recognized their names. And when they gave the date, people stared at them in silence. Because according to the calendar, it wasn't 1997 anymore. It was 2013. 16 years had passed. But for the crew, only 14 days had gone by. At first, authorities suspected a hoax, then a psychological breakdown, then fraud, but none of it made sense. Medical examinations revealed something impossible. Every member of the crew had aged only 2 weeks. Their fingerprints matched. Their DNA matched. Their memories matched. Everything matched, except time itself. Families they remembered had changed. Children had become adults. Parents had grown old. Some had died waiting. One crew member discovered that his 5-year-old daughter was now 21. Another learned that his wife had spent years believing he was dead. No explanation could account for what had happened. Eventually, the story was buried, classified, hidden away, and most people forgot. But not everyone, because years later, other reports started appearing. Pilots describing strange magnetic disturbances over the Pacific. Fishermen talking about compasses spinning wildly. Cargo ships reporting islands that vanished from radar. Always in the same region, always accompanied by missing time. But the most disturbing incident happened in 2021. A private yacht carrying 4 friends disappeared during a routine journey. Search teams spent weeks looking for them. Nothing. No wreckage, no distress signal, nothing. Until 8 days later, the yacht appeared again, floating calmly. The passengers were alive, healthy, confused, and according to them, they had only been gone for 1 night. But what they described shocked investigators. They spoke of an island, a place with strange silence, no animals, no insects, no sound, and at night, they claimed they could sometimes hear voices, not loud, not threatening, just whispers, as if hundreds of people were talking somewhere far away. But whenever they followed the sounds, there was nobody there. One of the passengers said he saw lights deep inside the forest, perfect circles of white light hovering above the ground. Another claimed he found an old campsite, rusty equipment, broken tents, and a journal. Inside was a date, June 14th, 1978. But when he picked it up, the paper crumbled into dust. They left the next morning, and moments after leaving the island, their radios started working again. When investigators searched the coordinates they provided, there was nothing, only open ocean, no island, no land, nothing. Some scientists believe the stories are impossible. Others suggest rare magnetic anomalies, and a few have proposed something far stranger, that certain places on Earth may experience distortions in space and time. Tiny cracks, where time moves differently, places where the laws of reality become unstable. But no theory explains one terrifying question. If some people returned after losing years, what happened to those who never came back? Because according to maritime records, hundreds of ships and aircraft have disappeared over the Pacific Ocean, and perhaps some of them aren't destroyed. Perhaps they aren't dead. Perhaps for them, only a few days have passed. And even now, as you listen to this story, somewhere in the endless Pacific Ocean, an island that officially doesn't exist may be waiting, silent, hidden, and untouched by time. And maybe someone standing on that shore tonight still believes it's yesterday. Because sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't losing your life, it's losing time. In the year 2048, a team of scientists conducting deep ice-penetrating radar surveys in Antarctica discovered something impossible. At first, nobody paid much attention. Unusual formations beneath the ice had been found before, but this time was different. The object they detected was perfectly circular. Not almost circular, perfectly circular. Nature rarely creates perfect symmetry, and according to the scans, the structure was buried nearly 3 kilometers beneath the ice. News of the discovery never reached the public. Instead, governments from around the world quietly formed an international research team. Over the next 8 months, they drilled through layers of ancient ice. Nobody expected to find anything extraordinary. Most believed it was some unknown geological formation. But when the drill finally broke through, the cameras revealed metal, a smooth metallic surface. No rust, no visible damage, as if it had been placed there yesterday. Nobody understood how that was possible. Temperatures in Antarctica had remained below freezing for millions of years, and yet somehow, whatever was beneath the ice had survived. After weeks of preparation, 6 scientists entered the chamber. The moment they stepped inside, something felt wrong. Not dangerous, just strange. The walls were smooth, the hallways were illuminated by dim white lights, and somehow, power was still running. There were no signs of damage, no signs of collapse, no signs of age. It looked less like an archaeological site, and more like a building that had simply been abandoned. Coffee cups sat on tables, computer screens remained active, documents covered desks, chairs had been pushed back as if people had stood up and left in a hurry. But there was one problem. There were no bodies, no skeletons, no evidence that anyone had ever died there. It was as if thousands of people had vanished into thin air. For months, researchers studied the facility. The language found on the walls looked familiar. Not identical to English, but strangely close, almost like a future version of it. Then, one day, a researcher named Sarah Mitchell made an incredible discovery. Deep inside the complex, she found what appeared to be a data archive. Most of the files were corrupted, but several remained intact. And what they contained made no sense. They weren't historical records. They were records of the future. At first, everyone laughed. The files described natural disasters, political conflicts, pandemics, solar storms, events that had not yet happened. Scientists assumed it was some kind of simulation, until 1 year later, in 2049, a massive earthquake struck the Pacific Ring of Fire. The exact date, the exact location, the exact magnitude. Everything matched the archive. People were shocked, but many dismissed it as coincidence. Then another prediction came true, and another, and another. By 2052, governments around the world realized something terrifying. The facility wasn't making guesses. It knew. The world entered a state of panic. Who built this place? How did they know the future? And most importantly, why was it buried beneath Antarctica? Years passed, and the mystery only grew deeper. Then, in 2055, researchers discovered a section of the facility hidden behind a sealed door. Inside was a single room. No computers, no machines, only a projector and one file, labeled simply Message 001. Nobody spoke as they activated it. The screen flickered, and an elderly man appeared. His hair was gray, his face was tired. Behind him, alarms echoed in the distance. The man looked directly into the camera and said, "If you're watching this, then we failed." The room fell silent. The man continued, "My name is Dr. Ethan Walker, lead director of Project Exodus, year 2189. Nobody moved, nobody breathed, because according to every historical record, Dr. Ethan Walker did not exist. Not yet. He hadn't even been born." The old man continued speaking. "We were not your ancestors. We are your descendants. We built this facility after the collapse. For generations, humanity believed we could save our world. But we were wrong. We tried everything. Climate engineering, artificial ecosystems, planetary migration. Nothing worked. And eventually, Earth died." The scientists stared at the screen in disbelief. The man looked exhausted, almost broken. By the year 2170, human civilization had nearly vanished. We had one final chance, not to save ourselves, but to save you. We developed a method to send information backward through time. Not matter, not humans, only information. So we buried this archive where we knew it would survive. We hoped that by changing your decisions, our future would disappear." He paused, and for the first time, tears appeared in his eyes. "But if you are watching this message, then it means we failed. We were never able to change history." The room behind him shook violently. Warning sirens screamed. Smoke filled the air. And then he said something that nobody expected. "You have one advantage that we never had. You still have time." The screen glitched. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the old man smiled. Not with fear, not with sadness, but with hope. And he said, "Please, do better than we did." The transmission ended. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved for nearly 5 minutes. Because everyone in that room understood one horrifying possibility. The facility beneath Antarctica wasn't a message from aliens. It wasn't a lost civilization. And it wasn't a mystery from the past. It was a warning from humanity itself. And somewhere in the future, a man named Ethan Walker was waiting, hoping that history could still be changed. Because maybe the greatest mystery in human history wasn't who built the door beneath Antarctica, but whether humanity was destined to repeat its mistakes, or finally learn from them, and perhaps the future had never been written. Maybe it was only waiting to be changed. What if one day, a man walked into an airport holding a passport from a country that simply didn't exist? Not in Europe, not in Asia, not anywhere on Earth. And yet, everything about him seemed completely real. His passport, his money, his travel records, even the stamps from previous countries he had visited. But according to every map in existence, his homeland had never existed. And then, he vanished, without a trace. This is the mystery of the man from Taured. The year was 1954, Tokyo International Airport. It was supposed to be an ordinary day. Thousands of passengers arriving from all over the world. Businessmen, tourists, families, nothing unusual. Until immigration officers stopped one particular traveler. He appeared calm, well-dressed, nothing suspicious. He handed over his passport, but the moment the officers looked at it, they froze. Because the country listed on the passport was something none of them had ever heard before. Taured. The man spoke French. He understood Japanese. And according to him, Taured was a peaceful nation located in Europe. He seemed confused by their reaction. In fact, he couldn't understand why everyone looked so concerned. The officers assumed it was some kind of joke, so they brought out a map and asked him to point to where Taured was located. Without hesitation, the man pointed to the border between France and Spain. But there was no country called Taured there. There was only Andorra. When the officers explained this to him, his expression changed. He looked shocked, then angry. He insisted that Andorra didn't exist, and that Taured had existed for over 1,000 years. The situation was becoming stranger by the minute. At first, the authorities believed they were dealing with a fraud. But then they examined his documents, and that's when things became truly disturbing. His passport looked genuine, not fake, not altered, completely authentic. Inside were entry and exit stamps from several countries that confirmed he had traveled internationally before arriving in Japan. He also carried different currencies, a driver's license, business documents, hotel reservations, even a checkbook from a bank no one had ever heard of. Everything seemed legitimate. Everything. Except for one impossible detail. His country didn't exist. The man claimed he was in Japan on business, and that he had visited the country many times before, but according to Japanese authorities, there was no record of him entering the country previously. No files, no documents, nothing. As the hours passed, investigators became increasingly puzzled. Who was this man? Where had he come from? And how had he managed to create such convincing documents? Or perhaps had he created them at all? Unable to solve the mystery immediately, officials placed the man in a nearby hotel for the night. 2 guards were stationed outside his room. The windows were several stories above the ground. Escape was impossible. At least, that's what everyone believed. The next morning, the guards unlocked the door and found nothing. The room was empty. The man had disappeared. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry, no secret exits, nothing. His documents were gone, his briefcase was gone, even the strange passport from Taured had vanished with him. It was as if he had never been there. Over the decades, countless theories have emerged. Some believe the story was simply an elaborate hoax. Others think he was a spy using fake identities during the Cold War. But there are those who believe something far stranger, something impossible. They believe the man wasn't lying, that somewhere, in another version of reality, there really is a country called Taured, and somehow, for reasons we'll never understand, one ordinary traveler accidentally crossed into our world, a world where his homeland never existed. Perhaps the strangest part of this entire mystery is imagining the reverse. Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that your country had vanished from every map, every history book, every memory, everyone around you insisting that it never existed, while you were the only person left who remembered the truth. Would anyone believe you, or would you become just another mystery, another impossible story, another man from a place that never existed? And maybe, somewhere out there, in another reality, people are telling the story of a confused traveler who arrived from a country called Earth.